Game begin.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the very first episode of the Spike Colony podcast. This podcast is going to regularly feature me and Michael Flores. This is our first episode. We were recording in the car, so it got a bit noisy. I have some aggressive sort of background noise reduction on here, making our voices a little bit robotic, but I hope it's a fine listen either way. The first two episodes will be out of the car, and after that will just be a regular high production value podcast. So thanks for tuning in, and here's Spike Colony number 1.
Okay, welcome to the very first episode of a podcast that we have yet to name. I'm Lanny. I am here with the Lord of Premodern, Michael J. Flores, in the car with us, the Viscount of Premodern, Francisco Palchek, and young knight of Premodern, Etai Kurtzman. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Hello, what's up?
So we're recording this in the car home from Lobstercon, the Premodern North American Championships. For those that don't know, the North American Premodern Championships are the biggest two-day Premodern tournament with 186 players on day one. The side event on day two was 58 players. The results of the car are astounding. My personal result was third in the main event. Michael J. Flores got second in the side event. Francisco Pawlusz got fifth through eighth in the side event. But the real star of the show is in the backseat, Etai Kurtzman, having basically never played Premodern, got second place in the main event. He was 19 years old. His finals opponent was Brian Selden, whose World Championship 1999 trophy is older than Etai himself. 1998, sorry, fact check. And just an incredible run.
Just from a fact check standpoint, the 1999 world champion was a player by the name of Kai Buddha.
I haven't heard of him.
You might not have heard of him.
Fair enough. Etai's the star of the show today, so let's just jump right into it. Tell us about your Friday or pre-Friday Etai Kurtz.
Like Lenny said, I hadn't played really much of any Premodern before the event. I played a few practice games against Goblins and Parfait, and then I did our NYC meetup, which was 4 rounds, of which I got to play 3 because I got the bye. Lenny and I had a really good discussion on the car ride over about just thoughts on the format, things to name with Meddling Mage. I played Blue-White Stifle Knot at the event.
Argent Knot, thank you very much.
Okay.
I call it Fran's deck.
Fran's deck.
So people are like, what did Etai play? And I say Fran's deck. Fran also played Fran's deck.
Yeah. We had a conversation about the format, what to name with Meddling Mages, just general thoughts, flex slots.
Wait, actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you for a second. On the subject of quote-unquote flex slots and on the subject of quote-unquote Fran's deck, would you consider a deck playing, I don't know, a top 8 deck, let's say, playing Enlightened Tutor? I'd be quote-unquote Fran's deck.
No, Enlightened Tutor is the anti-Fran card. If there's Enlightened Tutor in the deck, it is in fact not Fran deck.
Fran is also, of course, retconning history. In the very first version of the deck, he tried contain 2 copies of Enlightened Tutor. He cut that down to 1, then he cut that down to 0, and then he changed his last name so that baby was never associated with him again. But we are, of course, referencing another Blue-White Stifle Knot player who had a great run into the top 8 with Enlightened Tutor in their deck, a decision which we don't agree with, and I do think that the scoreboard vindicates the Enlightened Tutor haters in the car. But honestly, I guess let's just get into this now, Etai. What are some of the cool, sort of intuitions and impulses that I had with regards to, how to approach the deck building, and what was our deck building conversation?
Like you hinted at, our sort of biggest thing was 4 copies of Impulse in the main deck. I think most lists play 4 opt, 1 sleight of hand, and we were on 2 opt, 18 lands, 4 Impulse. and
One Swords to Plowshare.
One Swords to Plowshares. And sort of the conversation surrounding that was that Lanny at least tries to approach playing Stifle Knot like a sort of Splinter Twin style combo deck where you're waiting, building resources, sculpting your hand, and then you have one big turn. And Impulse is much better than the 1-mana cantrips in decks like that, just because you get to dig deeper. You can pass with Counterspell, which is really good.
Yeah, Etai, do you know what the definition of Xerox is?
No.
Mike, can you explain to Etai what Xerox is?
So Xerox is referencing a deck called Turbo Xerox,
Okay.
Designed by?
which was designed in 1997 by Pro Tour Hall of Famer Alan Comer.
Mhm.
So Comer played a mono blue Xerox deck at the Southern California Regional Championship in 1997 that topped up on 17 lands, so 17 islands. But it had cards as expensive as Waterspout Djinn, which is a 4/4 creature for 4 mana flying. But it has the disadvantage of having to return a land to your hand, which is something that I think you're familiar with given your deck, right? The innovation of Xerox is that Comer figured out that for every 4 mana, for every 4 1 or 2 casting cost cantrips in your deck, he could cut a land, right?
Yeah.
So the same quote unquote like sort of blue control strategy that historically might have played 26 lands, he was able to get down to 17 land by jamming it full of specifically Portent, right? And so he did like the Portent Foreshadow thing, which was Foreshadow was like a worse version of Predict, but it happened to be legal in 1997. So you know, I don't think he had Brainstorm actually, because that wasn't good in his deck, but like Impulse for sure. He has just a ton of cantrips. The name Xerox has nothing to do with the cards in the deck itself. It's that they thought that the strategy would be so pervasive that everyone would copy it. So that's why it's called Turbo Xerox. Here we are 26 or so years later, it's referencing exactly what Comer kind of innovated back in 1997. Whether you are an Impulse guy or a sleight of hand guy,
Yeah.
you are a disciple of Comer.
Yeah, and so what I see fundamentally is the difference between a card like Impulse and a card like Sleight of Hand is that one of the principle of Xerox, right? What's the advantage of cutting a bunch of lands? You don't flood out in the late game, right? And I think that there's this idea that you use cantrips. People think about cantrips, especially a cantrip like Opt or Sleight of Hand that doesn't go that deep. Is like, let's say it increases your hand quality by like 2 or 3%, or 5% or 10%, like whatever, X, right? Impulse looking at 4 cards, like from one card you get double X, right? So it costs double the mana and it gets you double the percentage increase value. But a deck like Stifle Knot, like the cards that you are digging for, they're not like Delver cards. They're not like a mix of like Counterspell, Force of Will, Lightning Bolt, Delver itself, where like making your hand marginally better is just like, good or bad. Like the cards you get off your Impulse or Sleight of Hand, it's like, I actually told Etai this analogy. It's like completing your straight, right? If you have a 4-card straight, it's not a hand. But if you get the 5th card, it's a hand. And in Stifle Knot's example, like that's Dreadnought, Activator, Cover Spell, Gush, or whatever. And so if you're missing one of those pieces, you have a 4-card straight. And that's why I thought the Impulse was better. I have a very strong conviction on that. Maybe Francisco can give his opposing opinion.
So I would love that for a second, but I just want to take a time out for 1 second, which is, this is our first episode, etc., and we're making certain assumptions about our audience and everything. I actually think it might be worth talking about how the combo works before we go into all of these details.
Okay, if you're not an Eternal Magic or Premodern player, there's a card printed in Mirage. It's called Phyrexian Dreadnought. It's a 1-mana 12/12 trample that says, when Phyrexian Dreadnought enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you sacrifice any number of creatures with total power 12 or greater. And then it uses either Stifle, counter target triggered or activated ability, or Vision Charm, target artifact phases out, and 2 other modes to get around that sacrifice trigger so that you have a 2-mana 12/12 at the end of the day, and you'll win in 2 attacks.
But 2-mana 12/12 trample.
12/12
It's actually very important.
because there are blockers.
Yep.
Blocking happens in Premodern.
And then there's a lot of like free spells like Gush, Daze, Foil that you pay 0 mana for, and in exchange you're either returning islands to your hand or discarding islands from your hand. When Lanny says there's a cover spell, right? Like you're completing your street isn't just completing a 2-card combo. Vision Charm is already kind of a cover spell because
It phases out. You can
Yeah.
dodge a plow.
yeah, so your opponent can't remove the Phyrexian Dreadnought before you actually untap your mana, ready to defend it with like a regular counterspell. But having stuff like Daze on an early turn and Foil make it really difficult to stop the 12/12 player from just killing you in 2 attacks. And this is an incredibly powerful strategy. Blue-white version innovated by Fran, although he'll be quick to say that Etai played the best deck but not the best list. And then played to great effect by Etai in the 2023 North American Premodern Championship.
Splash is white for Middling Mage. It's normally a blue deck in Francisco. He's not the first person to try it, but he's definitely the first person to, give it the love it deserved. Innovated a version that really leaned into the Middling Mage angle and some of the white cards in the sideboard. So I was opening the floor for Fran to talk about why he doesn't like Impulse.
Yeah, so having played the deck, we already talked about like the Xerox philosophy, right? So what I did find about this is that you're playing an 18-land deck, but realistically you're actually playing 17 because you're playing the singleton planes, which is very important when your game plan is specifically Meddling Mage, which by the way, it is 100% worth its inclusion. So a lot of argumenting has been going, particularly against Mike, who's continued to basically never would back down on the fact that Mono Blue Dreadnought was the better deck. And I'm like, that just doesn't work like that because decks are not good in the abstract, they're good in context. And the fact is
that the blue deck makes the straight more consistently than the white deck does.
Exactly.
But the white deck can also have quad aces, so the blue deck can't do that.
I would love to debate the point, but there's going to be plenty of time for us to do that in future episodes of the podcast that has not yet been named. But there might not be infinite time for us to spend with Fran and Etai coming off of their wonderful finishes at the 2023 North American Premodern Championship. So for now, I will just say whatever Fran said is probably true, right? So
He can back it up with a finish. And so can Etai.
All right, so
No mono blue player can back it up.
Listen, anyways. So I played mono blue at an event once, and I won. And some guy came. I don't know his name. He's just like, I got this deck for some streamer. I don't know how to say his name. It's F balls, but I don't know how to say his name. That deck had main deck Phyrexian Furnace, and I never played it, so I don't know who would have won. He could play the card Meddling Mage, and that would have been pretty bad for me because he would have said Phyrexian Dreadnought, that neither of us can combo, and he would have killed me with the 2/2. But that didn't happen. So there's only one champion.
How many rounds were these respective tournaments?
4 rounds.
Okay. How many rounds was the tournament that Etai got second place?
I am not arguing that the tournament that I won was more significant than the tournament that Etai placed in. What I am saying is, for context, I've only played mono blue once. I got a note from Phil before he published the results. He said, "Did you actually not play any game 3s? You 2-0'd every opponent." I'm like, I didn't play any turn 4s. And he's like, "You second turn comboed 8 times?" And I said, something like that. Actually, I played a long game with Roland Chang. But I don't want us to be about mono blue. I said a million times, if I had to play a Dreadnought deck, I would play Fran's deck right now.
That feels like a retcon. Fran's gonna go back to 1-mana Keyedrew.
Yeah, so as I was saying, the deck is actually playing 17 lands. You gotta play that basic planes because Meddling Mage is kind of a big part of your strategy in actually many matchups. Stuff like the Mirror, decks like Stasis, decks like obviously Parfait. Against all of those matchups, the mono blue version needs to deal with basically every single card in your opponent's hand, while Meddling Mage presents both a threat and a clock that must be dealt with somehow, except they can't, because you're naming source to Fpawlusz, which is the card that you're the most worried about.
So actually, I need to interrupt Fran for a second. I just want to say, Fran, just in the last 5 minutes, you've said stuff that's like so smart to me. It makes me like feel like I understand stuff so much better. Like even when you say like this deck plays 18 lands, but it's actually like 17 lands. There's the point of like the contextualization of the plans is like so interesting to me. Then when we were testing last night and you had Etai sideboard and Disenchant in the blue-white standstill matchup, and I was just thinking right now based on the stuff that you were saying, I'm like, oh, mono blue can't disenchant the humility, right? Like,
Yeah,
I'm like
boomerangs it.
So, yeah, so like,
yeah, but then the humility comes down on the next turn.
yes, you have to kill them, right? So, but the other thing, I just wanted to point this out for something Lanny said already. Like, if anyone had ever said to me, and I've been testing with Lanny for months, it's ever said to me, blue-white 12-12, I think of it as a Splinter Twin deck, which is what Lanny had apparently said to Etai. I don't know how many horses you would have needed to pull me back from playing blue-white 12-12, but no one ever said that to me. What good are you? I thought you were the coach.
Let the record show, I gave Mike blue-white 12-12 on Magic Online.
You never said to me,
It is at
This
least
is a Splinter.
plausible that I have mentioned it and you don't remember or didn't listen or disagreed. But, Fran, are we covered on the impulse discussion, or do you have anything else to say?
Oh no, I have the
Okay,
most important
let's get
part is
around
coming right now. Okay, so we're only playing 17 lands, so like the amount of quote unquote one land hands that you're keeping is rather high actually. Like you're interested in keeping that. So obviously impulse is not very good when you only have a single land that you can play. And being able to maximize that is very important. Just being able to like hit your second land up is extremely important. But something else is that you basically always want to have access to 3 lands. Like 3 is the key amount of lands that the deck needs in order to function. Because your deck is pretty heavy on 2-drops. You have the 4 meddling mages, you have the 4 counter spells. Obviously you have the daces, that those are not really 2-drops, but the issue that I have with impulse is that, let's say that I play a land on turn 1 and I pass. I obviously turn 2 I'm not gonna cast any cantrips, but let's say that I'm forced to actually counter my opponent first a survival on turn 2, or like a Noke, or something that I really must deal with that I needs to get countered. That means that I'm spending my second turn using counter spell, right? So I can't impulse. Then I untap on turn 3, and I still haven't cast my impulse. Let's say that I need to hit that next land drop. Well, you can't, right? Because the only way that you have is to cast the impulse, which means that you're not going to be able to cast your counter spell, or to cast your meddling mage, or whatever it is that you need to do on your turn number 3. So what that means is that you are stuck passing the turn back without casting the impulse, and now you're giving your opponent you're just falling behind. Right? Like you're not able to progress your actual game plan. And I cannot stress enough how important this is when Gush is such a big part of your strategy, right? So a lot of people play this deck as I'm just gonna combo on turn 2, and like that's easy mode, right? That's like the level
I play.
that's the level 0 way of playing.
That's a lot of people up with
and don't get me wrong, like that's gonna work. And yesterday it was actually pretty fun. Like I didn't know what my opponent was playing, but it was game 1, and I was on the play. I played land. Turn 2, my opponent played specifically Yavimaya Coast, right? And then I untap, and I went for it without any backup at all. But Yavimaya Coast and basic mountain
cannot cast anything that kills it.
That is my point.
Dreadnought besides maybe summon.
Basic Mountain and Yavimaya Coast are literally the only 2 lands that I would have done this against. Literally the only 2. Because they don't cast anything that I'm afraid of. Ever. Right?
But what you're getting to is that most of the time you're not a turn 2 combo deck, and as a result you need to fill out your curve. This is actually the Mike Singleton argument, and I accept this angle, which you're saying like you can't impulse for your land drop, but you can opt for your land drop on turn 3 if you miss it, if you're light on lands, etc., etc. I had basically a fundamental of like, one, you described the turn of having impulse and counterspell in your hand as like a bad turn because you had to use the counterspell and thus you couldn't impulse. I described that turn as just like the thing that the blue deck wants to do every single turn of Magic is have either a counterspell or a card draw spell, and then use the one that makes the most sense that turn in order to, progress your game plan. I do agree about the potential clunkiness if the opponent is just throwing out bangers every single turn and you can't just like counter everything. You need to like, progress towards your plan. So it's super interesting, but I think we should ask, we could finish this up and then ask Etai, either speaking broadly or on the speaking topic of certain cards, like what his feeling and attitudes were through the tournament. But go ahead.
So yeah, I just wanted to like counter that argument, and I agree with that if you're playing land still, when you're just jamming 26 lands. And like I'm talking about this in the context of specifically blue-white dreadnought. Like I'm not talking about this in the context of like blue
No,
or like any other decks. Like I agree about what you're saying with basically literally every other deck, but with this deck in particular, I think that just doesn't apply because it's so important for you to hit land around number 3. And it's actually so important for you, like you just don't have that many lands, as I was saying. So like,
Right. Well,
that is the problem. Like if you're playing like 20 lands, then I would be jamming 4 impulses without even thinking about it.
Right. So that's actually where I think we agree on this axis basically, which is that I'm just kind of like, I don't want to opt, like on turn 3, I don't want to opt for a land because one, missing is a disaster, right? Like I don't want to main phase opt for a land. Like missing is just horrible. And then if that was how I viewed Op's role, like a large percentage of the time in my deck, I would change out Ops for a land. And I did kind of half measure that because we gave Etai 2 Ops in the list so he could sort of Xerox it up. And I think, we're in accord on that curve related topic.
Fran, are you 4 opt, 4 sleight of hand, 4 portent?
4 portent, 4 opt, 1 sleight of hand. And I always say this, that there's actually counterspell number 4, source of pleasures number 2, and sleight of hand are like the 3 like flex slots that you could like change for whatever else you wanted. And this is what I went for in this specific event because I was expecting Sly and Goblins to be the most played decks by a significant margin. So I wanted access to the extra source of pleasures. If let's say the land tax were to be banned, maybe.
We'll save this topic for later, but yes.
Okay, let's maybe that would happen. So maybe I could see other decks like jump into the forefront at that point with like land tax not being able to prey on elves and things like that. And like Source of Pleasures is like okay against elves, but it's not great. Also, that would mean that less people would play Meddling Mage because like Meddling Mage is like the main problem card. The land tax decks are the decks against which I'm the most scared of Meddling Mage, basically. So things would change, is what I'm saying. So this deck was built the way it was for the metagame that I expected to see at Lobstercon. And I mean, that's why I built it like that. But I could definitely see it changing. That's what I would.
And we did build quite different sideboards. And so the Lanny, Etai list and Fran list has some divergences, but the core philosophy is functionally the same. So Etai, how did your tournament go? What were the kind of key matches? What did you learn about the deck as you were going? Because you were probably still learning the deck as you were going, and learning the format as you were going. So yeah, just tell us that story.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely learning the deck. I just want to say a couple things more about our conversation in the car that I think were really insightful. Something that sort of helped me see the Splinter Twin analogy is when you mentioned you can have these super good hands where you fight, because if you have 8 cards in hand and then you portent, you draw a card in your opponent's upkeep, you draw for turn, and then you gush. That's 11 cards that you're fighting with to your opponent's 7 most likely.
7 maximum.
Seven
Opponent, unless your opponent has an Urza's Wobble or Porton,
Right.
they cleaned up their 8th card.
Right. So even though your answers may not be as clean as some of your opponent's answers to a dreadnought, like a null or swords or a seal of cleansing, you will have the card quantity to get there a lot of the time. And just about, I guess, opt versus impulse. Impulse felt really good all day. I think, like Lanny said, casting opt on turn 2, or on turn 3, hoping to hit a 3rd land drop feels really bad. And there are a lot of situations where I missed a 3rd land drop, but I had impulse plus counterspell, which felt a lot better. But
Then I actually asked you, when I handed you the deck for the very first time, because people don't know this part of the story, I messaged Etai on Facebook. I was like, you're coming to this tournament with us, right? And he's like, yeah, IDK. And then I told him when to register, and he's like, I registered. And I was like, what deck do you want to play? Like a few weeks later. And I just told him about a few pre-modern decks. And Etai was like, Goblin sounds sick.
Yeah.
So we go to Mike's place to test with myself, Etai, and Patrick O'Halloran, and noted hype man for the squad and the 3rd member of the famed Hot Dog State University. And I Etai's like, well, I actually want to try this blue deck. I want to try the Stifle Knot deck. And then I was like, Etai, would you like to try it with Impulse or Opt? And his answer was, yeah, I think Opt or Sleight of Hand is better. And I was like, use Zoomers in your 1-mana spells. Impulse rules. I'm smarter than everyone. But anyways, he his first reps with the deck, I just left 1 Impulse and I switched it to mostly Fran's list. But I was able to convince him on a car ride and start the tournament with 4.
I actually don't want to like derail, because I want to actually listen to Etai's story, because I didn't hear the whole story of his tournament. But I actually want to say one thing about that playtest session, which was I was playing the Landstill side, blue-white Landstill, and Etai was playing the blue-white Dreadnought side. And Etai had gone for what Fran is calling the level 0 easy mode, right? Where he goes basically 2nd turn combo, but he also had days backup, right? And I defeated him from the Landstill side, despite the fact that he had the super fast combo with the days backup, right? So my conclusion is, I'm so smart, my deck is so great. Haha, I'm right, Fran, shut up. But the actual moral of the story is, in game 1 of the finals against Brian Selden, who's playing the Landstill side, Etai had the easy mode turn 2 combo and didn't play it because of that situation. Instead, he let Unmeddling Mage, name Swords to Plowshares, executed on the 3rd turn instead, and they didn't play a 6th turn. And so, like, I was like, this is, like, I literally went, like, crazy. Like, I watched this, and then when they're shuffling up, like, I found Lanny, and I'm like, oh my god, Etai made this play, like, you know, it was the opposite play from playtesting.
Yeah, it's literally Uma Thurman, like, busting out the 5-finger, death maneuver of just, like, he learned it. He taught, like, he learned it. It came out of nowhere. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's like Selden's sitting there, like, obviously trying to assemble Wrath of God, which is the only spot, and Etai's sitting on a daze, right? Like, if I didn't already have tears in my eyes, like, I would have had tears in my eyes.
Yeah, we were all weeping. Yeah, it was like, so yeah, Etai round 1 or the first round, you remember?
Yeah, actually, I wrote all of them in my notes app, so I can go through.
He was crushing and taking notes. I was trying to take notes this tournament, and after round 4, I was so fatigued, I just, like, stopped.
You see, I didn't take any notes because then my report would be too accurate. So years later, I couldn't be called for, like, a Brazen Borrower versus Growth Spiral mistake, or...
We can't explain that one now. My riz is simply that your notes aren't important after you get eliminated from the tournament.
All right. So round 1, I played against Standstill. To me, it seemed like a more enchantment-based version. My opponent had Replenish and a lot of the Tides and Enlightened Tutor.
So that's high
Did
control.
they have the card Standstill in it?
I I believe so. Yes, it wasn't just the replenished deck. Yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to keep derailing, but
No,
this is my favorite thing that happened in the pre-modern world. Sam Black goes on one of the podcasts, and it was probably Manos on All Things Considered. Shout out Brian Manolakis.
Well, he told me this in person.
Yeah, and he tells, and he's like telling the story to Mike. And so basically, Mano's like, so your deck, it's so good, it beats goblins, it beats elves, it beats parfait, it beats stuff. Is there anything? Is there anything in the meta that can possibly beat it? And Sam's answer is to invent a deck that doesn't exist yet,
But
nobody has ever attempted to play. And he's like, that would probably beat me. And he describes like, kind of like a blue-white control deck that has like a standstill replenish package, and like literally no one's considered this like seriously.
So like all Seal of Cleansing, but you replenish back the Seal of Cleansing.
It's like incredible. And it appears that Etai's round 1 opponent was on the Sam Black fictional deck with replenish and standstill.
But that's kind of what me and Tom play.
Yeah, but you guys have 1 replenish, 1 tide, and 3 standstills, and 1 to 2 enlightened tutors. Yeah, it's not the same as Sam Black's fictional.
Yeah, but Sam literally said to me, he said, well, what if you were trying to just beat me? I'm obviously taking notes for a future trip to Misty, like, oh, I got to beat Sam. I'm like, I'd probably play a blue-white deck, right? And he's like, no, you have to play all Seal of Cleansing, and then you have to replenish the Seal of Cleansings back, and I don't think I could win then. But anyway, Etai played against the fictional Sam Black deck.
All right. Yeah. So we played a super long game 1. Maybe not super long. 17, 18 minutes. But I lost that one. Just to, I believe it was replenish getting back tide and seal to get rid of all my lands. And then game 2 we played a super long one. I was pretty behind, and then this was the round where our super sick sideboard deck came up. On one of the very late in the game, I played a turn where I fought over a Stifle Knot. My opponent had a bunch of answers, and then I cast Brain Freeze, parting my opponent with, I believe it was 6 copies, leaving them with only 2 cards in their deck. So, yeah, I guess
They don't have Opalescence, correct?
correct.
Yeah, so they couldn't just be like, well, then I'll replenish and kill you. You aced them with that brain freeze.
Yeah.
Opponent goes to their sideboard and is like, shit, he's on his brain freeze. What am I supposed to do about that? Nothing you can do.
Yeah. And I guess an even crazier part of this game is that on turn 3, I had cast a Flash of Insight for X = 1, trying to find a land drop. And the way I set up the Brain Freeze play is I cast it exiling 18 blue cards from my graveyard when there were 22, 21 or so cards in my deck. So I got to leave a bunch of cheap spells towards the top of my deck, impulse through the rest of the cards.
Oh, geez. You grabbed the brain freeze and then you stacked the deck per the text of Flash of Insight, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I would have never occurred to me to do the thing that the card said you can do.
Yeah.
Right? Look, my god, I'm very
You would have just shuffled, Mike.
Yeah, probably. It's like what Impulse says, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I did go up to Fran after. I was like, because the card just says put them on the bottom. It doesn't say in any order.
Yeah.
I was like, did I cheat? Did I put them in, like, was I allowed to put them in any order? And he assured me that I could. But yeah, so going into game 3, we had 3 minutes left on the clock. So I decided to board in my dazes because I figured the only game I can win is a very quick game. And
See how smart this guy is? This is round 1. And he's already like this in awe of how honed in he is.
We're watching the top 8, and Mano said to me, "Hey, is this one of the Zoomers that you were talking about on my podcast, right? That think in a different dimensions than you?" And I'm like, "Yes." And that kid was top 8 of MCG Vegas. like he's probably the second most decorated player in the room, playing against the first most decorated player.
So yeah, and quite frankly, in game 3, I drew the nut draw. I'm pretty sure I had turn 2 dreadnought with Gush double foil backup.
Yeah, that's a straight flush.
Yeah.
Or straight gush.
Straight
gush.
Yeah. So yeah, finished with 7 seconds on the clock or whatever it was.
You didn't go to turns?
Did not go to turns.
You would have got him in turns.
Certainly wouldn't have gotten Etai.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah,
First unintentional draw dodged.
more to come. So round 2 was against Enchantress. I had never played the deck before. I didn't really know what it ran. I remember Lanny telling me in the car that I couldn't beat Sterling Grove plus Solitary Confinement. So I think the one meddling mage I cast during that match, I named Solitary Confinement, even though it probably should have been a Seal of Cleansing.
Also true, but
Yeah.
how did you remember? The background here is we had to get Etai up to speed on the format in 4 hours, so I had Patrick pull up on his phone. Jared Doucette's very helpful. Just big shout out to Jared Doucette for 100 reasons, but very helpful metagame breakdown. We just went down the list. When we got to Enchantress, I was like, you're probably not going to play against this deck, but you know about like Enchantress decks in contemporary Magic. It functions very similarly. Except for it's got crazy cards like Elephant Grass and Solitary and like, Oblessence to wave and stuff.
Etai, was it the same Enchantress player I played in the last round?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was very intimidated because this guy rolled up with a wooden deck box for his 2 non-spin down D20s to keep track of life, a Nebuchadnezzar playmat, and sort of tattered intra-deck deck box wrapped with a rubber band. So I thought I was lost from the start. But yeah, I just, as I recall, sort of did the knot thing. Some games are just easy.
Easy and thus not memorable.
Easy and thus. But yeah, so that was round 2. Round 3, I played against Replenish. Sort of squee, discard, careful study, frantic search combo deck.
They got Shui.
Yeah,
Shout out Michael Flores.
shout out Lanny. Which I did not know was a deck.
That's literally the deck I made 3rd with last year.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this thinking like, oh, Etai then matched up into Replenish and has played against Replenish cards, it sounds like he played against a lot of Replenish cards. And you'd be like, oh, well, Etai and Mike are friends, so Etai probably knows all about Mike's deck. Etai knew nothing about Mike's deck. He didn't know the text of Opalescence, and he read it in front of him and just simply misinterpreted it. But well, I'm sure he did.
Yeah, I'll get there. But yeah, so I got game 1. I don't remember it being super long game, just sort of. Actually, that one was pretty long. I think he had sort of a squeak going, but I was just letting him intuition on my turn and then countering what he got. And he had, I think, around 6 mana in play, so he couldn't double spell most of his turns. So I just sort of got to sit with my meddling mages.
He didn't have a soul land?
He did, but still only had
6 mana.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of 4 mana cards in deck.
Yeah. Game 2 was a super long one. I think by the end of the game, I had cast 4 Swords to Plowshares and 3 Replenish. None of which, or one of the Replenishes actually did resolve. But I ran
Either resolve or replenish.
Oh, in my imagination, I'm like, he's cast 3 replenishes and the game's going?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
So one of them resolved. I managed to keep a couple lands in play with a Stifle and Swords to Plowshares. I don't remember exactly what I swords, but yeah, I ended up with some lands in play, but then did not have a counterspell for the 4th Replenish. And then game 3 was another one with not a lot of time on the clock. Boarded in Dazes again, took out Brand Freeze, which I had brought in for the matchup because my opponent was drawing a lot of cards. So I figured I could get them and have them die on their draw step. And yeah, that one did go to turns, but I managed to get it on, I think, turn 3 or so of extra turns with the knot.
Still a concluded match.
Yeah. Round 4, I played against a Jund Madness style deck. It had
In the 3-0 team.
yeah, Yeah, it was a sick deck.
The what mongrel infestation deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, that deck's good.
Infestation, survival of the
Etai,
fittest.
was that the first time you saw a Dargaz's Caldera, or do you play that in Command?
I don't even know what that card is.
Excuse me? What kind of speech is this?
It's the 3-color land that bounces. Yeah.
Okay.
Daragaz Caldera was
don't
not the offensive word.
He played that card.
I know.
But it didn't seem like a favorable matchup for B just because of swords, and he didn't have really any way to interact with the not game 1 and game 2. I had some counterspell backup.
Did you name anything with Meddling Mage in that matchup? Because that's got to be hard to read, right? Your opponent's presenting Jund mana, and the card pool is all cards that existed before you were born.
I
Like,
didn't
That's why
naturalize.
Terminates in Modern. Yeah, naturalize. Yeah.
In game 2, my opponent had Hull Breach instead, but I had
You knew about Hold Reach, though, luckily, from our test.
I did.
And naturalize was the correct name for here.
I don't remember the exact position, but it seemed good enough for me. Round 5, I played against Dimitri on Burn, who was, all my opponents were really nice and super awesome, but I don't know, I remember a particularly fun match with Dimitri. He was on Burn, which is a favorite matchup for the White Dreadnought, and he got unlucky with a multi-5 in game 2, so I got that one. Round 6, I played a feature match against the eventual champion Brian on Standstill. We played a pretty drawn-out game 1, which he won, but I felt like I was in for a long time, even though I might have not been. In game 2, if anybody goes back and watches the coverage, definitely notice I was playing pretty sloppy, and I ended up casting a Brain Freeze when I thought my opponent had fewer cards in his deck, and I should have waited a couple more turns at least, but at that point we had a minute or so on the clock, and I was feeling the pressure, and that would have been to play for a draw, so I lost the match 0-2.
Brian Selden had plot armor in this tournament, so there was no way Etai was going to figure out a lethal Brain Freeze.
So I played Brian Selden first round of the tournament. He defeated me. Then he defeated Etai, or he defeated you first?
He defeated me, and then he got paired against Etai immediately the round afterwards.
Defeated Etai, and then
I actually sat next to Etai's Burn opponent. Talk about your opponent some more, because this was the gentleman that you were speaking Hebrew with, right?
Oh yeah. So he recognized that my name was a Hebrew name and asked if I spoke Hebrew, and we had a fun chat trying to say magic terms in Hebrew, which neither of us knew. But yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, he sat down. I'm sitting across from Brian. He's sitting across from Etai. And he was like, "Oh, great, I dodged Lanny because I'm playing Parfait and he's playing Burn." And then Brian's like, "But is this not also a bad matchup?" And it was like, after I think an island was in play, and he was like,
Dimitri definitely knew what I was playing. We were near each other for a couple of rounds.
Yeah, life at the top tables.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know about that.
But yeah, super pleasant opponent. It was a great match.
So yeah, Brian Selden. I want to talk about Brian Selden too. So
For sure.
how did it feel different? Like, we were obviously intimidating you by explaining to you about how, again, Brian Selden's trophy is older than Etai. Like, what does it feel like? Because I know you're a common competitive Magic player, and the pre-modern room is going to be much different.
Mm-hmm.
So was it something like, did you feel extra nerves that you were in a coverage match against a world champion, or were you dialed in, or a mix? Like, do you think it was a nerves-related blunder with the Brain Freeze, or what was?
I think it definitely was a nerves-related blunder, but I think it was more about the clock than the feature match.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty good at tuning out who is my opponent, who's watching, etc.
You could sit across from PV to tomorrow and play exactly the same.
I would hope so. Yeah.
No.
Well, hopefully a little better than this match, but yeah.
Oh my god, what
I think it was most of the time. But yeah. So now
For our future. Yeah.
now I'm 5-1, and
What's the top 8 cut feeling like at this point?
We were pretty sure we had checked, Swiss Triangle in the morning, and we thought 611 was a clean cut.
No. We said 6-1 and 1 bubble. So we had put in a like 250 person tournament,
Right.
And we were like 6-1 and 1's gonna bubble. We reduced it to 186 when we found out that it was 186, and we were like, okay, like somewhere between 1 and 3, 6-1 and 1's won't make it. But a lot of unintentional draws were busting our stuff.
70 people didn't show up?
Yeah, something like that. So going into round 7.
So Rebel could definitely have come.
That's correct. Well, yeah, I mean, literally anybody. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to talk to DFB or Jared about what a no-show policy looks like for next year if we can get our last in.
Tons of people would have wanted to come.
Yeah, Brad Nelson. Anyways, going into round 7, Etai and I are both 5-1, and we both think that we have win-ins because we have 60% plus breakers, and it looks like only 1 or 2 6-1 and 1's will bubble out. So, tell us about that match.
Yeah. So I got paired. I did not know what my opponent was playing beforehand. Turns out he was on blue-red Stifle Knot, which I did not know was a deck before that match.
Yeah, I had not told Etai about blue-red Stifle Knot because I haven't seen it in months.
Yeah.
Christian played it in the PSS.
Yeah, that was how long was that ago? Would you qualify that as months or?
Oh, certainly months. It was last year.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it was game 1 was sort of interesting. I like got an early knockdown, but it kept on getting iced by Fire Ice.
Ice.
So
Mike's nickname in the PSS.
so I couldn't kill for a few turns, but eventually he ran out of resources. And game 2, I remember him getting a little mana screwed.
Tell us about your sideboarding against a completely unknown deck.
I don't remember exactly how I sideboarded.
Did you keep meddling mages against the deck that has Fire Ice?
I did keep in meddling mage.
Do you think that's right?
I do not.
Okay.
And
Doesn't he also have Grim Lava
Grim Lavamancer and Lightning Bolt?
yeah.
And Fling. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Not that Fling is relevant. Sorry.
I also did not know Fling.
Wait, did he fling you? Okay, keep telling the story.
I didn't know Fling was in his deck in game 1.
Did you know Fling was a card? You knew Fling was a card.
I knew Fling was a card. I don't know that I could have told you with certainty that it was legal in this format, but I didn't know it existed. But yeah, in game 2, he discarded it to something. I don't remember what. It might have been a foil. It might have been just a hand size. Like, oh, that's cool. But yeah, that was another, sort of interesting game 1, and as I recall, a pretty straightforward game 2. There's my phone with the notes. So at this point, I thought that was a win, and then I sort of did a little fist bump when I won, and then
I picked you up, I think.
Well,
my round concluded much later, but eventually I picked you up. Yeah,
I think that was after round 8.
Oh, okay.
This was round 7.
Is that because
yeah,
Is that
Etai is
because-
very light, so
Etai is small and you're like a burly aerial silks competitor?
I am like a skinny man with like strangely broad shoulders from aerial silks, and Etai does not weigh anything.
I have watched your aerial silks videos and you were flinging Ryan around like
Yeah, Etai lives weighs less than my wife, which is don't tell my wife I said that because my wife is actually the lightest person on the plane.
other than Etai.
It's second one. Anyways, okay, so never mind. We fist bump, or you fist bump, and you're hyped because you think that you're in,
Yeah.
and then
Then
the standings get posted,
yeah.
and then we still think we're in.
We still think we're in.
because Swiss rounds are paired from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But of course, there can't be repairs, and sometimes the no repairs rule makes it very awkward. And so you got paired with somebody who can't draw. I got paired down with somebody who can't draw. You're playing a win and in. What was your win and in manage?
Yeah. So I played against Replenish again.
Jesus. And so you've played against Replenish cards 2 rounds now.
Yeah.
What is your did you feel like you were getting away with winning a bad matchup against that deck, or were you dialed in where you're like, I got this? The next time somebody plays a Parallax Wave, I'm just gonna start signing the slip.
Definitely not the latter. It still felt like a tough matchup, but definitely more, definitely easier than the standstill matchup. Like, they're similar in that they're just mid-rangey draw decks, with, you know, certain cards I have to counterspell.
So after all this, you think Replenish is a draw deck and not a combo deck?
I'm
not even saying one or the other, but I just find it interesting that that's your read.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but like they do a lot of sculpting with what's the enchantment that bounces, and then they attunement and frantic search, and there's the 1 blue, draw 2, discard 2.
Careful study.
Faithless Looting's granddad.
Can I interject for a second as a
Replenish?
At one time,
Master.
the most decorated Replenish player in Premodern.
Actually, likely still.
So
things considered.
I think it, like, you had once countered an argument of mine as a criticism and saying, I just didn't want Prison to be good in Premodern.
Yeah.
You said you just don't want Prison to be good. I think that Replenish is a Prison deck, right?
Well,
like it seeks to.
That's a hot take.
Why? I mean, like, it seeks to just make it so the opponent can't play.
Well, okay. When it makes the opponent not play, it also has 12 power.
Sure.
So it similarly makes the opponent not play.
Or 4 power.
Dreadnought does. Well, minimum 8.
No.
Well, okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. This is a non sequitur. Mike.
Yeah, what?
Prison decks contain, like, you know, Sphere of Resistance, like Modi, Othi, you know.
Okay, all right, blow up all your lands, same thing.
Right, but it's like, you know, I think it's interesting to take an angle, but like when I had a discussion with Rich Shea, and Rich Shea, of course, Parfait Master, for those who don't know, and Parfait is a prison deck, for those who don't know, or sometimes call it a control deck because, you know, non-believers keep on putting islands in it for some reason. Rich Shea, a lot of people, I talked to him at the tournament, a lot of people ask him, do you even have fun when you play the deck? And like, if you haven't met Rich Shea, like, this would be a fair question, but after meeting and talking to Rich Shea, like, this man is so happy playing the deck. And he's like, of course, I share this belief with him. He's like, I'm building the prison. So in Mike's analogy, casting Replenish is kind of just like airdropping the 3D printed manufactured in China prison, like, around your opponent. It's like in the new Zelda, like when you like take out your box of like lasers and knives and you just drop it on your enemy and they're dead. So they're in a prison, but like for like 3 seconds before they die in a blazing salvo.
No. I will not accept this, okay?
Because I in the new Zelda, but yeah.
I am like, if I have a fault as a Replenish player, it's that I'm not bloodthirsty enough, right? I am very like, people are like, why do you keep that hand? Because I'm like, I had a careful study squee, right? Like, I am so happy to just like cast a spell. Like, I'm so happy to just cast a Parallax Sign on turn 4 or turn 3 and see if it resolves, right? I will slowly, incrementally build my spot because, like, my experience of playing the deck is like, I'm testing my opponent, seeing what can resolve, right? If something resolves, I'm going to use it to build an advantage. I think very much like what Rich is saying is like, I'm building the prison, right? Like, replenishing all your permanents into play is not only is it the easy mode, but it is terrible relative to like the dreadnought easy mode. The dreadnought easy mode you do on turn 2 with, you know, Gush Foil Days backup, right? Like, if my whole game plan is to just like intuition and frantic search all my permanents in my graveyard so that I can replenish them, how fragile am I to a single counterspell?
Well, that's the question.
Very, very fragile, right? So my way of playing it is to like kind of like chain, see when I put a hole in your armor. I mean, if I resolve a Parallax sighting, it's a blue deck, I'm gonna win, right?
Yeah.
But but like it's a lot of time you're getting there. And
Although Etai defeated Resolve Parallax Tide a few times, didn't you?
Yeah.
Parallax Tide is the blue on Etai.
Yes.
Yep.
It's wave and tide. It's very confusing.
Yeah, we remain confused. Even the boomers remain confused.
I don't. I know which one's which.
Okay.
No. Mike is like, call.
Call. Some boomers know.
Okay, so Etai, what was my first question? Is like, it feels like before I derailed with
You were asking him if it's a quote unquote a draw deck.
Yeah, is it or no? No, I'm saying is it a good or bad matchup? How are you? Were you feeling confident when your opponent is like fled his strand?
I was. Yeah, I thought at first that he was on standstill, which put the fear in me a little bit. But I definitely got more confident when I realized it was punish. So that sort of gives an inclination. It's just like it feels a lot clunkier and doesn't interact with me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You like 4-man swings.
Yeah.
If you have dazed.
Yeah.
Or a 2-minute kill combo.
Yeah. So how'd the match go?
This one I don't remember many details of. I have it here that I won game 1, lost game 2, won game 3. I remember feeling pretty far ahead in game 3, but then my opponent sort of mounting a bit of a comeback. But then I was able to close it out.
That was the opalescence wound.
Oh yes, okay. Yeah, I should sell this. Fran reminded me.
So I was actually watching this part of the game. That's why I thought it was funny.
Yeah. So game 3, I was attacking my opponent with meddling mages.
3.
Yeah. Okay. It's sort of coming back now. I didn't actually cast a dreadnought this game. I drew 3 meddling mages, which I believe were on Swords to Plowshares, Seal of Cleansing, and Parallax Wave. And my opponent, clearly had some of those spells in hand. Wasn't casting a ton.
So your plan with those 3 mages is to counter replenish, but otherwise you're covered.
Yeah.
Rather than naming replenish.
Yeah. I can't remember. The third one was either replenish or seal.
Okay.
I can't recall. Actually, I think it was replenish because I was thinking these meddling mages are going to win the game without the knot.
Right. So they can have as many Seal of Cleansing as they want. They're getting beat by 2/2s.
Yeah.
Put Exalted Angel on the sideboard of your replenish deck.
So yeah, my opponent cast Opalescence in the later stages of the game, and I thought it made itself a 4/4. And I was like, I should double check. So I read it, and I read it as each global enchantment is a creature with power toughness equal to its mana value. And I was like, okay. So I was fighting over them. I think I want to cast 2. And after the match, Fran pointed out to me that it does say other. And that
he fought over the first one, and I'm like sitting in the back. I'm like, that's weird. Okay. And then the second one resolves, and he stops attacking with the melee mages. There's no other enchantments in play. And I'm like,
oh no.
So it will actually. I went to David. I think when I went to, but I went to this. I'm like, I think he doesn't know. And then I come back, and the second opalescence resolves, and he stops attacking with melee mage, and I go back and I say, he doesn't know.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one. Did your opponent put the soul opalescence in the middle of their battlefield, or off to the top, left or right or side? Were there any cues to you that it was a creature or not?
They played it totally recently.
Yeah, they don't. No, I don't think they. Yeah. I'm just wondering if because I would have just. I'm playing a deck with no creatures, so I put my permanents. In the middle.
And so were they.
I just put my permanents in play in the order that I drew them.
Yeah. We'll talk about your style in our day 2 coverage.
But yeah. So despite not being able to read, I managed to close it out. We can call it nerves, but
I call it plot armor.
Plot armor.
Yeah.
That's a good one too.
Etai can make mistakes and not lose. It's impressive stuff. He did it to me. He made no mistakes in our semifinals match.
He was saving out with the no making mistakes for the match against Lanny, which was a great move.
Yeah. And so was his deck. as far as the mistakes are. Anyways, so you won.
I just want to wait. So that's Etai's round 8 Swiss
Correct.
match.
Yeah. So to round 8 to get 7-1 and be the
First seed.
top seed. That's correct, because Brian Selden and Peter Smits drew into the final.
I don't think it was
602.
Peter Smits. I think it was
Both Smiths made top 8, right?
No, so
it was the person in 8th
Top
place. Because it was my opponent. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, right, because I was 5th seed and Smits was 4th seed. Well, no, that might make sense. I don't know.
All right.
I'll pull up the actual standings, but the point is, 1st seed overall in your first, like, one, like, I picked you up at this point, like,
Yeah.
spun you around in circles, even though I was extremely fatigued from my 0-0-1 unintentional draw, 55-minute parfait mirror.
Parfait versus
Yeah,
Sam Black.
partnership, the Rich v Sam mirror. We're like, you're ready to win this now, yeah?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I felt the nerves sort of coming on towards the end of the tournament, and I'm like, I'm actually doing pretty well, and making a deep run, but I'm not playing super great, and definitely, I think, worse than I started off playing.
Right, you felt like this double thing of like, because in the, well, actually, let's go ahead and re-background the MTG Vegas situation. So what's the format of MTG Vegas? How many players, and what did you run? Like, you know, like, how many players was it?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
It's basically a Grand Prix.
It was,
Yeah.
I remember it being
1,000.
in the high 900s.
Okay.
So,
And you made top 8. For those who don't know, this is the Midnight Months, right? Sealed.
No,
Vow.
Crimson Vow.
Crimson Vow.
First
sealed.
Crimson Vow major.
Okay, so Crimson Vow Sealed is notoriously bomb-heavy format. So in that time, did you feel like you were just like getting lucky running hot, or did you feel like you were dialed in the zone, like bound to top 8?
I definitely thought I was playing pretty well.
Oh yeah, so you played out of your mind into top 8 the last time you were in like a high-pressure end of the tournament situation.
Yeah.
So by comparison, you're here, you don't even know what the cards on the table do, and you're like, I'm also in the top 8.
Yeah.
First seed. Top 8.
First seed.
Actually, Etai, I've never asked you this, but so you beat Roman late in that tournament, right?
Yeah.
Of the base tournament.
That was
Roman Fusco, friend of the
nine,
podcast.
Friend. You may have heard of him. I don't know. He's my son. Etai's dad. So
I was Etai's dad for this
so
event.
apparently he's both his dad and dance partner. So Etai, like in that tournament, MTG Vegas, you know, I texted my friend Covert Go Blue, who's, you know, the big famous YouTube streamer.
Like us famous friends.
And I was just like, you know, I think my friend's doing pretty well on this or whatever. And so Covert Go Blue was just like, had basically like adopted Roman for this event. It was like
Uncle Blue.
feeding him snacks, like, I don't know, like probably buying him massages, whatever you do in Vegas, right? Like, you know, just, he's like, don't worry, I got your butt.
Massages are free if you lose enough at the table.
Yeah, so he's like, you know, Roman wasn't losing, right? So
Yeah.
other than the Etai, actually, let's be clear, right? He only lost to Etai going to the top 8. So he's like, no, I got your friend covered. And he's, and, you know, later, Roman's like, oh yeah, he's like feeding me snacks. Did Covert Go Blue also take care of you, or only take care of Roman?
I didn't talk to Covert Go Blue after that wasn't Vegas that you introduced us.
We met when Hot Tech State University. Oh, so
Yeah.
you just didn't hang out with him in Vegas at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did Roman share his snacks, or just kept all the honors to himself?
I mean, we were in separate pods for the last draft, so we didn't interact a ton, except we actually registered each other's decks, which was funny.
All right.
But yeah, no, I was sort of flying like on my own for that event. I almost didn't go.
Good thing you did.
What?
Good thing you did.
Yeah, but I, you know, had my own hotel room.
Yeah, that
Didn't
was
go
the
to
day
people.
that you became a certifiably great Magic player.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you got to put up results, right? You
Yeah.
can't just like win FNM.
What is the day that I became a certified Blue Bay Magic player? Hasn't happened yet.
We all know what your accolades are.
are substantial.
Listen, if you're curious about Mike's resume, just look it up. It's just for itself.
I'll tell you what, talk to Tom Metelsky.
Thomas,
He'll let you know what my accomplishments.
Big shout out to Tom. We'll tell that story in a little bit. But Etai top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I guess, just to do a comparison, I was also first seed going into the top 8 of that tournament. I was feeling it a lot more for that one.
You still had all these.
I still had all. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to clarify it wasn't his first top seed.
Yeah. No. Let's be clear. But yeah, I think a couple things helped, which is that I think being on the play with Dazes is even more significant than being on the play as Limited.
No, Daze is a magic card that reads 1 and a U, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. You may return an island to your hand instead of paying the mana cost in Daze. Why is that so good on the play, Etai?
Because I play my Stifle Knot and then they die because I counter their spell.
Nice.
Yes. But yeah, so that helped. And then also, Fran informed me that there were no prizes for this tournament.
You didn't know up until this point.
I did not know.
Sorry about that.
You're like, oh man, I'm in the mix for like like something really big, 200 player tournament. It's like gotta at least be a 5K.
Yeah,
It's like
for sure.
found a trophy over there. That's nice. A trophy and painting.
Pause for a second. There's a substantial entry fee and et cetera for Lobstercon, but it's a charity tournament.
Yeah.
So all of the proceeds after they pay for the rental of the hall and everything go to charity. So it's not like they're just,
Yeah, there's no rake.
Jared, you said isn't over there like,
in a fluffy chair and a robe, just like it played Dream Modern to fill my bank account.
I can't believe the amount of work that Jared, and Bart put together. It's such an amazing thing, and he's just like literally sitting there doing
raffles. The community really comes together, and this is what keeps the vibes immaculate. Because I hope you noticed, Etai, that none of your opponents were sweating like crazy stuff, missed triggers like sequencing, communication,
Absolutely.
angle shoots,
Yeah.
or just like the greetings and just like that kind of stuff. There's just no like I'm gonna crush you vibe, even though since we go to the school of Michael Flores, in our brains we're like, hey, how you doing, where you from? I'm gonna crush you. But yeah,
there are I'm gonna crush you vibes. There are explicit I'm gonna crush you vibes from me.
Well, I describe it. I mean, look, once my 7 cards are dealt, like the where you from talk is over. But up until that moment, mate, you're about to play your winning and you're probably, I watched you play your finals match and you're making jokes in the finals, but that's probably because you were informed that there's no prize money.
Yeah. To clarify, totally fine that there was no prize money. I think it was an awesome tournament, and I'm so glad it was for charity. But I think that helped the nerves.
Yeah, you just went from like 1,000 to 0.
Yeah.
You're like, I guess if I win, my homies will buy me lunch, and also they're gonna buy me lunch anyways. So, and I did buy Etai a lot of food this weekend, but he's a college kid; he can't afford anything.
Thank you, Lanny, for feeding me.
Yeah, and he's also he's like a computer science major. He hasn't even started, he hasn't even dropped out of college to start a startup yet. So he truly doesn't have any money.
So yeah, I guess top eight discussion time.
Yep. First round of the top 8.
First round of the top 8. So I got paired against Blue Red Nottingham, different player.
Unreal to me that after months of radio silence, two Blue Red Knot pilots at the top tables. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is Blue Red not good?
Etai, is Blue Red Knot good?
I guess it sort of comes along with what I'm going to talk about in the match. I think in our match,
Did you keep meddling mages this time?
No. Thanks to Fran. Yeah.
Downloaded.
Yeah. But I think the differences in our decks really shone through in that match. I can't remember if this match or the other Blue Red Knot players, but I remember it being awkward for my opponent to cast Gush because I had multiple mountains in their deck.
Yeah, I actually want to quick aside. Etai, are you understanding of the idea that enemy-colored mana bases are worse in pre-modern because there's no enemy-colored fetches? Like, did you put that together today or yesterday? 2 days ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Imagine coming to the format and being like, I want to play a blue-red deck, and then the format just being like,
Okay, keep going.
all right. So yeah, the mountains made it awkward to cast Gush. And I thought the Lotus Petals were really weak. They just sort of
They also play Lotus Petal still?
I mean, in blue-red, it's like, we haven't seen it. It's a while left.
Fran, I'm sorry to derail you. I don't understand any of this stuff. Fran, explain to me why they're playing Lotus Petal.
So they're playing Lotus Petal because the mana base is very much unsolvable. So you kind of have to play Lotus Petal. Also, they're a lot more all-in than the blue-white version. So they try to... It's basically an entirely different deck. Like, you look at both the blue-white / mono-blue, and you look at blue-red, and the approach to the game, like the way that the decks play out, is dramatically different. Like, obviously, I think that you can't really afford to play Daisies and Gushes in blue-red. Like, straight up, you can't.
You can't, but those are the best cards.
That's why I don't play blue-red.
Maybe, do you remember the name of, do we remember the name of this individual?
I do know.
Well, we can look it up then.
They sound like a perfect future podcast guest.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not saying the deck's bad. Or, I don't know if it's good or not, but
Like,
no one's
really
played
good,
it.
needed.
It's not been played in any of our events. I play events every month, like stuff like that. And
There's probably an angle. It probably plays better into
Exactly.
decks.
but
It's not that it's definitely not bad. It's
It's
a very
good
early
argument.
player's deck. It's just an entirely different deck.
right.
Yeah.
It seems to me like if you want to describe blue-white as like a Splinter Twin deck, this is like a combo deck, right? They're like flinging their dreadnought.
They're like,
Lotus Petal.
is there any combo?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Is there any combo / burn deck that exists? Because that's what this is.
Draco Blast.
Oh yeah, Draco
Yeah,
Blast.
so this is basically Draco Blast.
Okay, so Draco Blast is a completely different deck than like a black-red mid-range control deck is like how you would. Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
Because I learned a lot about Draco Blast this weekend somehow.
I mean, this isn't about me, but I am so excited to build David Daniels' Draco Blast deck when I get home. I think I have Insidious Streams in the Unsorted Rares box. It's certainly not in the Sorted Rares box.
Yeah. All right. So how'd the match go, Etai?
Yeah, so I think I remember them being two pretty close games. I think game one ended...
But only two.
Only two, yeah. My opponent, game one, we were fighting over knots. He was pinging me with a Grim Lavamancer, and then in the last turn, he went for a lethal dreadnought into flaying, which I had counter for. I don't remember like how much we fought over it, but I killed it with knots.
Did you bring Blue Blasts in against them?
Yeah, I did. And then game two was, I thought I was ahead for most of it, but it ended up being a lot closer. I ended up at 3 life with an untapped Grim Lavamancer on their side. They just, got me a bunch with the Grim Lavamancer plus the damage from my wastes and fetches. But I was able to just close it out. So yeah, my opponent was like wondering at the end if they missed an attack. I don't think they did. But that match was streamed. And I think
Missing attacks with Grim Lavamancer is very easy to do though, because you always do your turn planning and then things happen and you like miss an activation when you thought you could have had one and like nothing you could have done. So.
Wait, so I'm just like plotting this out because I'm just listening to what Fran said before. Etai explained like the collisions match. I guess if somebody just like breaks 2 fetches, you can just like throw 2 lightning bolts at them and then combo them with their 3.
Yeah, but that's a 4-card combo. To save 1 turn of attack.
Yeah, but you get other action though, right? Like you could also first turn combo them.
No, actually, philosophically, right, Fran, would you agree that the blue-red player is probably thinking that they're favored because they get to present a clock, in addition to threatening the combo? Like, not all things being held equal, of course, because red cards aren't as strong and they won't have access to stuff like Plow. But like, we talk about this is the kind of stuff that's good into Dreadnought all the time, and if you have clock plus disruption, that's normally a good recipe.
Yeah, the problem is that you get to blank a lot of the red cards because, like Lightning Bolt doesn't really do anything against you. So, like, literally the only card that matters is Grim Levimancer.
No, but it chip shots you so that they can combo you, though.
Well, it's not worth the card.
You have Plow, and, like, they don't have as much counter magic as you do, so there's not that many cards that matter from their side.
So they really need a board in Jackal, is what we're saying.
Wait, they have
Yes.
Jackal Pup too?
No, I'm saying.
But if they had Jackal Pup, it would be a lot harder because you're basically winning 80% of the counter wars because they can't afford to play as much counter magic.
Yeah, they're less
efficient.
Because their island count is so much worse.
Their eye count is worse, their mana base is worse, so sometimes they may struggle with that. They also need to play more actual sources with the Lotus Petals and stuff. So they have that thing. So because of that, I personally feel favored in the Sula mirror because you don't need to. You need to know what you need to fight over, and they are very much the aggro deck. I feel like we have the inevitability, so they need to put something into play and try to pressure you weakly. But you're playing like post-board, you're playing like 4 Source of Pleasures and like Last Breath, which cannot matter. I think that because you have Blue Last, you don't even bother with the Last Breath anyway.
Yeah.
And you also, funnily enough, if they fling you, or like if their game plan is fling, you have the anti-fling, which is you just plow your dreadnought, and that basically blanks their combo as well.
Yeah, 2 for 2. Yeah.
So if they do have that aspect to it, you have the exact opposite. Like plowing your own dreadnought is actually something that comes up very often in that matchup and then in the biggest lie.
So, but they have the additional angle of just first turn to combo with Days Back Up, right? Like that's because they have Lotus.
Yeah, because they have Lotus Petal, but that's
incredibly narrow.
Yeah, Casino Dreadnought.
Are you saying the dealer could help me out with this?
I would say that this is dealer related. Straight flopping a straight. Yeah.
You think that by agreeing with this question, you may have just ruined my Misty performance?
Yeah. I can't wait to tell this backstory.
Okay. Anyway, Etai.
So yeah, it was a good match. Very well played by my opponent. I think it was covered. So I think one I'll be looking to go back and watch. Then the semifinals. It didn't start for another hour and a half after the trailing final.
Yeah. Oh man.
I wonder whose fault that was.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It was Lanny.
You have time to rest.
It was Lanny.
Intentional. I was like, win or lose in this quarterfinal match, I just need to make sure that my boy Etai gets his water, gets his snack. So I'm just gonna take an extra hour here.
Flint and Selden completed their top 4 match, so there was no problem for the feature match table.
Yeah, the feature match table was used for how many out of the top 8 matches, both the semifinals, the finals, and a quarterfinal. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I did it for the community.
So yeah, I mean, I could have been resting, but to be honest, I was so stressed watching Lanny's semifinals match. I thought he had it locked up, and then it looked like he might be falling behind again, and I don't really know how Parfait works.
Wait, I actually want to ruin the tempo of this because you're just saying this right now. Like, Lanny will tell his version of this however he's going to tell it. But I'm obviously watching this match behind Lanny. Clearly who I'm going to be cheering for at this table. His opponent is probably a pillar in the community of high standing. But, I'm cheering for...
Shout out Peter Smith, you rule.
For my friend. And it's game 3. Lanny is like first turn land tax versus first turn Goblin Lackey, right? So Lanny doesn't have any answer to the Goblin Lackey. He's about to get hit by the Goblin Lackey, but he's got a second turn Oath. Smits hits him with the Goblin Lackey and casts what, Lanny?
Tranquil Domain.
That's okay. Lanny's second turn upkeep, he Enlight Tutors for another Oath of Druids, plays it on second turn, and then what happens?
I believe naturalized.
It was naturalized.
Yeah.
And I'm looking over and I'm like, well, top 8 is great, Lanny. So at this point in the game, the opponent has taken 2 turns, which included destroying 4 cards, 2 oaths, a land tax, and hitting him with a Goblin Lackey twice. So then Lanny manages to get another Oath of Druids before completely losing the game, flips over well in excess of 20 cards.
And no Gaia's Blessings.
No Gaia's Blessings. The Shard Phoenix. I look at his graveyard. His graveyard is Fire Ice, Engineered Plague, the 1 Ivory Tower, and the 1 Zurin Orb.
So my life total is no longer going to
ever increase unless those cards get
for the next 45 minutes.
For the next 45 minutes. Again, Lanny has been hit repeatedly by a Goblin Lackey. There's a ton of goblins at play, but he has an oath. But he's of course forced to use the Shard Phoenix, right? So he just doesn't die to the battlefield. And then Smits plays a Tormod's Crypt, which basically means none of the, literally, Engineered Plague, Zurin Orb, Ivory Tower, gone.
One of 2 copies of Engineered Plague. At least I had the second hanging around.
And I was just like, Mano was watching, and he said, I would have given up at 3 different points of this game. Lanny Huang went to the top 4 to fight Etai. It was insane. That game, like, he slowly built back. Like, you and Peter were just 0 cards, right? Like,
yeah, we were
both 0 cards.
Yeah, smacking the top of the deck, needing something. But I had an Oath of Druids in play.
Yeah, so he can't advance, right?
So,
and it's not like the dealer was gifting either of you, right? Like, the dealer's just like, here's nothing, here's nothing, here's nothing. But the problem is, at any point, if Smits draws a Tranquil Domain, like, there's a huge swing on the battlefield.
Yeah.
That's going to allow him to rebuild his
Yeah,
attack.
my permanents are Oath, Engineered Plague, Circle of
Protection, right? Of which there's 1.
Yeah.
And again, oh my God.
And
it was very tense. And
Etai was, I asked him about nerves, and Etai was like, I was more nervous watching you than...
But Manalakos was literally, I would have given up at 3 different points in this game. Anyway, sorry, Etai. That was
good.
Crazy.
Yeah, that was...
And Etai didn't understand any of it, but...
No.
He felt it.
I felt it.
There were a lot of singletons that got Tormod scripted. How about that?
Yeah.
Semifinals match against Lanny. Game 1, I think we both kept 7, right?
Game 1. I think so.
Yeah. So
I think I kept like land tax, seal of cleansing, or something like that.
Right.
Or land tax plow.
Right. So this game I went turn 2 dreadnought and vision charm, which for those who don't know is usually better than stifle on turn 2, because you get to untap before your opponent has a chance to interact with the dreadnought.
Well, at least against white removal decks, right?
Right.
Against red decks, you'd rather have Stifle, right?
Right, if you want the dreadnought to
Yes. Against white decks,
but Etai's feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
Phased out dreadnought, 2 islands, and a counterspell on hand.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, I think I just attacked twice with my 12/12 in that game.
Yep. Yeah, after 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's quick.
That was game 1. It's gonna be so great to click on the YouTube link for this match and just be like, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of tells you who wins if it went 5 minutes.
And then game 2, Lanny mulligan to 5. I kept a 7 with, I think it was a counterspell, a meddling mage, a cantrip, a vision charm, and a few lands. And Lanny goes turn 1 land, Mox Diamond to rest me, takes my counterspell, and I draw the knot. He goes duress, land tax on his next turn, and I think
This is I remember this very vivid.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want?
So on the land tag side of the table, Etai has the hand he described in one unknown. So he has Vision Charm, and he drew a card for turn, and I have Duress. So for those of you who are going to play the Duress deck versus Dreadnought deck matchup, it is not a viable line to Duress aggressively. You have to often navigate your Duress such that, the turn that they go for it, you can Duress to open up your Sealed Cleanse, your answer, right? That's often optimal, different cases. So I'm sitting there, Etai's got 5 knowns and 1 unknown, and I have just Duress. My hand is land Duress. And I'm like, well, I need this Duress later, but I also might need it now. And I Duress him, and then he turns up his unknown, and it's Phyrexian Dreadnought. And I'm like, of course. And so I take the Vision Charm, and I play land tax, and I don't play another land. And Etai, new to pre-modern format, functionally new to the entire concept of land tax, untaps on his turn, draws a card, and says, go. He doesn't play a second land, which is, it's like a simple thing, but yeah, if you don't have to let your opponent tax, you don't let them. I draw a card, it's nothing, I say go. Etai draws a card, he says go. So he has 2 unknown cards, Meddling Mage, Last Breath, and Island. And maybe something else irrelevant. Or no, because I addressed the thing. So I draw a card, and I say go. I have nothing once again. Etai draws his, third card. So his third unknown card, plays an Island, floats 2 mana, plays Gush. Oh, you're right. So he has a Dread on him. Plays Gush.
He had a second land tax in this one.
Oh, yeah, I had a second land tax. Plays Gush. Draws 2 cards with 2 mana floating. So he's used his land draw for this turn. He only has access to 2 mana this turn. He plays Island, Dreadnought, Vision Charm. I untap, draw, pass the turn, upkeep, plow the Dreadnought. Etai has 0 land, so he can't re anything. And Etai just plays foil. And so, yeah, his unknown cards were Gush, Vision Charm, foil. That he drew runner, every turn against my multi-5. And I said, Etai, you're really gonna do this to me. And he really did that to me. And I'm so proud. We got up, shook it off. I didn't feel anything. I was like, well, I knew this was going to happen. I spent the whole day just being like, don't pair me with Etai. I built this deck. I know it crushes me. And I was hoping that if we did get paired, Etai didn't know the extent to which it crushed me. And then I would somehow get him because he didn't understand how my deck worked. Again, so he did let me tax. So he did understand on the fundamental level how my deck worked. And he got up, and I was just looking at the table, and he came up and he hugged me. And the best thing ever happened, an audible awe from the onlookers as we hugged it out, and I sent Etai to the finals.
Yeah. So in case Lanny didn't make it clear, I got very lucky. He got very unlucky. Yeah.
You saying the dealer? The dealer hooks up Etai?
Yeah, and that, I don't know. I think the whole day for me, just not knowing what was going on, but drawing the stone cold nuts.
Impulsing into it sometimes.
Yes. Often. Yeah.
Wait, I need to understand something. Is the dealer particularly kind to Etai, or is the dealer kind to 12-12? Or is there an overlap?
Little column A.
There's an overlap.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if there would be a good Michael J plus 12-12 plus dealer interaction. It could just go the other way. In fact, it has. But I wrote all about that. You can read it on my loan article.
The dealer and I have an interesting relationship.
Sorry.
Final
to
time.
interrupt you. Can we look at the next exit? Because I really got to piss.
Okay.
You can keep this and take it out of the podcast.
Okay.
You do as you please.
Francisco, after break. So, yeah, I mean, I'll keep my eyes out. Or just, you can interrupt. Oh, you just like want to exit? Okay. I was going to look for a rest stop, but I haven't seen them.
There's not on this turf, I don't think.
Okay, cool. You know more about driving around at Northeast side.
Continue.
All right. So yeah, in the finals now, and I'm honestly just feeling sort of bewildered. I didn't expect to win because Lanny knows so much more about this format than I do. Built my deck.
Lanny knows more about this format than anyone.
Yeah.
Lanny, I unequivocally, Lanny is the most prepared player at that tournament, in my opinion.
I agree entirely.
And I went fourth in the draft. Hurst, you picked correctly. I think there's no way we could have predicted Tom Metelsky and food poisoning, but still.
Yeah. Tom Metelsky food poisoning. And I would just like to say, I played against Brian Selton in the first round in the Landstill mirror, and so if I hadn't, lost to the eventual champion, maybe I would have gotten his pairings all day. You never know.
So yeah, I'm up against Brian. He's my only loss so far in the tournament.
He's all of our only losses.
Yeah.
I had another loss.
Yeah, Mike had
I had a second loss.
He's most of our only losses.
At 2 unintentional draws.
And yeah, so Mike already mentioned this about game 1, but I kept a hand.
Oh my god, it was so good.
I don't remember. I think I was missing one piece, but I had, Meddling Mage, a Daze, one half of the charm of the
Combo. It's just
the combo. And yeah, so I went turn 2 Meddling Mage, turn 3 do the knot, Daze's answer, which I believe was a Seal of Cleansing, and close it out.
So a Days wasn't live again. Oh no, of course you named Plowshare, so there's no Plowshares happened.
Yeah.
Am I making a legal traffic move?
I guess there's one way to find out. Will a police car fly out of the sky?
You don't know what they got access to these.
You go up there's a Dunkin'.
Okay. Well, Dunkin', that doesn't look like a bathroom Dunkin'.
Oh.
I mean, Fran will investigate his options while Etai finishes his final story.
Yeah. I mean, games 2 and 3 are all sort of a very lengthy blur.
Maybe well, game 2, what do we remember about game 2, Mike? Game 2 seemed like a pretty solid Selden blowout. I mean, this is like so hard for Etai. Like, I don't know if we've talked about how difficult it is to play Blue White Knot, but it's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we've talked about how difficult it is to play Blue White Knot against Flooded Strand decks for an entire day. Like, looking at your notes, Etai, you played against Flooded Strand how many total times in the Swiss?
4. 5.
And how many times did you
in
play?
the Swiss? It was 3.
Okay. And then how many times did you play against like Basic Mountain, Basic Forest?
0.
Well, you played against. once.
I played against Burn, and I played against the Madness deck.
Yeah, which probably had Basic Forest.
Yeah.
Narrator. It turns out it was indeed a bathroom Dunkin'.
Yeah. It was a bathroom Dunkin'. I was wrong. We're in a strip mall. Strip mall Dunkin' Donuts. Never know if they have a bathroom. Turns out they did. And they have Gatorade. And we still have 2 hours left on the drive. So in case an hour and a half of the pod insofar has not entertained you enough, that's like not even the half of it, Etai was telling us about game 2 of the finals of the North American Premodern Championship.
Yeah.
Which we don't remember anything from. Game 2, you just got owned, yeah?
Yeah.
No,
So-
game 2 was long.
It was
I drew. I remember.
Is this the game where you gush to hit a land drop on 3?
I have no.
Or something along those lines? Michael, do you remember?
Etai took I don't want to make it any kind of like a normative judgment on Etai's line because I didn't understand it. Etai had 2 land and an impulse, but rather than casting the impulse, chose to gush main phase. So it seemed to me like he ended his turn with 1 fewer land in play and still had his impulse in hand.
Right, this might have been...
So I didn't understand it. So he probably had a plan, but I didn't know what that plan was.
Well, I think he was
I don't know
playing
about
off
probably.
heuristic. So,
What, say again?
I don't know about probably.
So, I think Etai, new to casting the card Gush, ascertained quite quickly that flow 2 mana Gush hit your land drop is like the best thing ever, correct?
Yeah.
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 Gush banned in any format that anybody plays.
Restricted in Vintage.
Etai, how much Vintage did you play?
0.
Okay.
On the plus
So-
side, there's like a 400-page Gush manifesto
book,
that you can read. So there's some literature for your future.
So, so I think that turn, what I saw happening, my read is that because Etai did not have access to a 1-mana cantrip and instead he had Impulse, he elected to Gush to hit his land drop. And instead of impulsing to end the turn, and this is actually not exactly the scenario, but
Fran described earlier.
it was not exactly, because this is turn 3 and he would have been looking for his 4th land drop. But yeah, noticeably he could opt and miss there and still keep 2 mana up for like a standstill, which is super good from his opponent, etc. So, scoreboard, Etai's, still has 4 copies of Impulse in the finals, and anyways,
I mean, Fran did not lose to not having Impulse. Fran had a migraine and dropped out of the tournament after winning the first round.
I mean, the guy on the Art of Impulse looks like he has a migraine.
Fran, did you perhaps play in the 3rd round of the main event?
No.
No, but you
Migraine got me good.
But
I went 1-1 migraine. That was
you went 1-0 migraine. I mean, like, come on, dude. You were already dead to the migraine at round 2.
1 in migraine.
It was okay.
I mean, obviously the official record is 1-1, but that's like when Hoist Gracie's coach threw the towel in.
I actually lost fair and square to the legend himself, Dmitry Novikov.
You lost to the Redburn deck.
Yes.
I don't buy it.
Dude, I legit did. I looked at 25 cards without finding a dreadnought both games.
Yeah, talk about plot armor. Fran and Tom did not have it, and Etai sucked it all up. I took all
You know what the worst part? We haven't told the story, and I thought that we have earned the top 8 after that story.
Yeah, I thought we
So-
would have started with the story.
I thought that that's how you earned the plot armor, but apparently
well,
that's
you earn it for your friends. Yeah,
apparently, yeah.
we'll definitely tell a story after we're finished with the finals match,
Which is going to be a different episode. I'm going to be. There's no way this is one episode.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and take a break, but do a double feature release or something. But anyways, I think when I remember witnessing game 2, I remember that it was grindy, and I think you ended up. I took a lot of photos, and I believe game 2, Brian Selden had 4 Mishra's Factory in place.
Yeah, that's what I remember too.
And then in game 3, Brian Selden had 3 Mishra's Factory in play. So the man who trimmed Fairy Conclave down to either 1 or 0, I don't recall. I played a match with him. I think he might have said, I don't even have Conclave.
He cut Conclave. Selden texted me a month ago.
Yeah.
Because when I first posted Landstill, he wanted to talk Landstill lists.
Yeah.
Right. So, and he's like, I cut Fairy Conclave and I'm playing Forbidden Force Spike. So he switched it. He has 3 Coastal Tower.
Yeah. And that's a cool move. So one thing is that Standstill putting the clock on Dreadnought is like pretty good once they have access to enough mana to like conceivably run out. And then Dreadnought of course has the Winter Orb angle. A lot of interesting dynamics, but I will say that I think the Standstill side, given that they have their colors more or less have enough access to colored pips, drawing a bunch of factory is going to be really good for ensuring that the game ends.
Yeah.
And I think that's just what happened. I think he just started attacking you. You were drawing cards, and you didn't win the counter war. You didn't have the brain freeze. You did not ride off into the sunset.
This is true. I think that's what I remember. This was also, midnight after a day that started at 10:30 a.m.
Thanks to who took 2 hours on a time top 8 match.
I will say,
describing like 3 turns of that last game. I mean, give the guy some credit. Like, gee, it was unreal.
that he survived to make Smith's play for another hour. Like,
Yep. That was unreal. I mean, since we're still talking about that game, and I'll talk about my run, but yeah, it was super cool, and Smits and I both agree it's the best game of Magic that we've ever played. So just an insane memory, like a core memory for me.
it could have gone either. That's the thing, right? Like, you built so much advantage, but he was just like one green pip away of like from making you completely rebuild, right? Like, and you had no Shard Phoenix.
No,
anymore,
just dead. Just dead. Because if he has Tranquil Domain, then he can time it to the point where he can put lethal power on the board that same turn.
and attack you to death, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, he's maybe concerned with an Armageddon, etc. But anyways, the final game, Etai, did you have an analysis that you made a mistake earlier than your sort of pivotal mistake?
I don't remember.
Okay,
But I
like, or perhaps let's talk about let's talk about Winter Orb and how blue-white Dreadnought plays against blue-white land still, and the importance of Winter Orb. And actually, let's talk about your sideboarding, because there are 3 blue-white Dreadnought players in the car, and I think all 3 of them would sideboard in this matchup differently. So what do you sideboard? To your memory.
Yeah. So I boarded in 2 Winter Orb, 2 Disenchant, and a Null. What else? A Brain Freeze and a Flash of Insight.
So you sided in a ton of stuff.
7 cards, yeah.
And if Selden had mages, he would have to side in Last Breath.
Yeah.
But you knew Selden didn't have mages, right?
Right.
You got the scout.
So I boarded out, I believe...
He scouted by playing across from him.
Fair enough.
I believe I took out Swords, a Dark Art Wastes, 3 Dazes.
Well, you took out all your darker weight?
No, one on Dark
Oh,
Art.
okay.
And I can't remember if it was 2 ops or an ops and a foil, but
Yeah.
So you're like dramatically reducing your mana by cutting
Both a cantrip
and a land. Okay.
yeah.
But what's the theory behind that, right? Like,
why?
The theory, at least what I was thinking, is that, my fast games, like, I don't need to have a ton of lands. I need, 1 or 2. And, like, there's games where, I'm going to get screwed because I, have 1 land and a Winter Orb instead of an Aunt, and I don't find a second land, and I lose those, and I think accepted that. But the games that do go long, I think it is like, given that, I mean, Selden's cards are better than mine. They like
See, okay,
yeah
expand.
yeah they do more things. They provide a great advantage. He has like a similar amount of interaction to me, and like ways, especially post-board, ways to answer my Dreadnought cleanly.
Right. Like Factor Fiction,
Yeah,
quite powerful in the face of even
yeah. With Factor
given that both players can cast on it.
right, with Factor Fiction, with
Standstill.
Standstill, and even his lands like match up well with my cards, with the factories and my meddling mages.
Did he get a lot of Dustfall activations on you?
Not in the finals.
Because Selden has 2 copies of Dustfall. And
Yeah, he did get me with it and when we played in the Swiss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Etai, one thing I noticed you do in the finals match that Fran said he agreed with, and I disagreed with, is that you would bait the counter war with Dreadnought, and then your follow-up spell would be Winter Orb.
Okay.
Whereas my belief is that you bait Selden's interaction with Winter Orb, and then your follow-up is Dreadnought.
Yeah.
Talk me through your thinking there. Fran can extrapolate on why he thinks you're correct.
So I actually think possibly my biggest fallback in the tournament is not knowing how to play with Winter Orb, both, at a theoretical level and as how the card works.
Yeah. You don't play Winter Orb in your Blue-Red Delver Legacy deck.
This is true.
Is that a card people play?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an option.
So, in when I played in the Swiss, I resolved a Winter Orb on what I thought was a pretty good board state, but Selden was able to sort of maneuver it such that it was almost more harm than good. I don't remember the exact details, but it did work for him as well.
I gave you the weapon, but not the knowledge to wield it. I'm like literally the genie on Burning Wish for that.
Right. Oh yeah.
Do you know Burning Wish?
Yeah, I do.
If you don't know Burning Wish, there's probably a podcast with Sam Black that will tell you all about what it can do.
But yeah, and I felt ill prepared on when to fight for it, when's a good time to resolve it, how I should be prioritizing it over Dreadnought.
However, you do instinctually understand that you want your opponent's land to be tapped when it lands, so that's why you were taking Winter Orb second lands. Yeah. And also you sort of intuitively understand that you will be attacked with far fewer man lands under Winter Orb.
Right.
Yeah, also, if you have Winter Orb in play, it's hard for them to defend themselves with manlands and make them into 3/3.
Yeah, I mean, I would still rather a mage than a Stone Rain, right?
I'm just saying it's harder, right?
Yeah.
Like, they might not take that line, and also if you've got
Actually, this
Disenchant
goes
or
into
whatever.
Disenchant. So you brought Disenchant probably for fear of humility. You brought in 2 copies.
Yep.
Plus the Annul also catches Standstill. But you're also very clearly telegraphing that you would be willing to aggressively disenchant factories that were animated to block.
Yeah.
Which, talking about that interaction, very risky play, right? Because if they win, they'll counter war on the disenchant. You lose the disenchant and your mage that they're planning on blocking.
I mean, the time when I did that, Selden at that point had 3 factories and a coastal tower play, so I felt reasonably safe.
He was very low on blue mana.
Yeah, he was very low, on land.
You ran the numbers, and you're like, disenchant
I'm
land.
completely willing to accept that those numbers were wrong, but
No, I mean,
yeah.
I just think it's interesting, right? Because you were disenchanting manlands, you're stifling flooded strands. I don't think that a lot of other pilots of this deck would necessarily do the same thing. And so it was just great watching you play and seeing you sort of interpret your role in these matchups and your lines, on the fly, having never encountered them before it. I mean, obviously you can stifle a manland, and Legacy, the background is that Etai's played some Legacy, so he knows block cantrips, he knows tempo, he knows Delver, but yeah, he doesn't know Premodern, he doesn't know Dreadnought, so I just thought it was really interesting to watch him pick it up and learn as he went, and these are some of the key points. But yeah, you can share the Vision Charm situation here.
So late turning the game, I thought for a while and decided I would try to go for, fight over a Dreadnought. It was a Dreadnought that I went for that turn.
Right.
Yeah. And then resolve
Both players have like 8 or 9 lands in play.
Yeah. And resolve the Winter Orb. Knowing that it was very possible that Selden had a disenchant and that I wouldn't be able to counter it. But I had a Vision Charm in my hand, and I did think about the interaction, but I thought that because Winter Orb, things unfazed, I thought that things unfazed Earthy untaps tap, and that given that was true, I would also untap my lands.
So you would have traded the full untap for Selden's full untap.
Yeah, which is
your
another
full untap
thing I probably didn't consider.
Right. You thought that after you succeed. Okay, let's rewind.
Yeah.
Both players are down to Etai is down to 3 mana left with a bunch of tapped lands. Selden is down to 2 mana left with a bunch of landings tapped. Etai has sniffed the Disenchant and sees the line. I'm going to cast Winter Orb. He's going to spend his last 2 mana to cast Disenchant. I'm going to Vision Charm, which saves the Winter Orb, and then he's going to be tapped out. Of course, with kind of the mentality of like the Winter Orb is saved, but of course that has no effect. So Brian gets to untap all of his permanents. Double error. The way phasing works, I looked this up during this match. Permanents phase in, you would think during your untap step, they phase in before your untap step. And so because the Winter Orb phased in before Etai's untap step, all of a sudden Etai had a Winter Orb in play, a bunch of tapped lands, to Selden's fully untapped board, and well-stocked hand. And plus Etai was down a Vision Charm, which, as the game played out, Selden actually mercifully disenchanted the Winter Orb again a few turns later that unlocked Etai's lands. And Etai then drew into Dreadnought but had no enabler. Selden casts Fact or Fiction, revealing Decree of Justice, like impulse something land. Etai split is like decrees
Thought it was
and non-decrees.
Counterspell.
Counterspell? Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Counterspell lands. Etai splits and offers Selden both decrees. Etai's on low resources. He has like 3 or 4 cards in hand. Selden takes the decrees, untaps, and he makes an angel. And everyone loses it. And Selden's like,
baller move.
This is the first angel that ever remained. And this is actually interesting. Up until this point, Selden's actually quasi on the ropes because Etai's beating him down on the meddling mage and is like has him on like sort of a 5-ish turn clock. I'll have to refer to my coverage of this for some of the details later, but effectively it was just super interesting and super close, and Selden just went ahead. Went for the jam? Yeah, I did.
Covered like you did in my match with David.
Yes.
I'm gonna go back and read that. That's awesome.
So, and Etai actually has a foil in hand and elects not to foil the angel because he has foil, he has Dreadnought. And
I think, no, my hand at this point was Foil Island.
yeah, so you would have just full pitched.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you didn't even have a Dreadnought. You top deck a Dreadnought the next turn. It was so awkward. Everything was so awkward. You top deck a Gush after you were already dead, which like could have made the hand. It was just like,
Yeah.
so many bad things had to happen. But yeah, so you elected not to go to 0 cards in order to foil the angel, because of course your meddling mage clock was like decent, but it was like contingent on Selden never getting to a factory or an interactable. Like
Yeah.
Selden just not having, not using his factories, and he would use his factories if you have no cards in hand.
Right. So I think my thought process at that point was,
I'm dead to this angel anyways. I have to just runner.
yeah.
And you were 1 off runner, and you were short a Vision Charm. The next draw is Meddling Mage. You play Meddling Mage so that he can't make a second angel. Your next draw after that is Dreadnought. You don't have the Vision Charm. Your next draw at 4 life is Gush. And it's too late.
Yeah.
So I think that like the idea of Vision Charming to phase out the Winter Orb in response to the Disenchant is incredibly cool. That's like
It is.
seeing
If
that
you did it on your opponent's turn.
it's like incredibly cool, incredibly seductive, and and
we all would have done it,
yeah, like
except for Fram.
yeah. So and I was just like, oh shoot, I hope this works the way he wants it to, because I've never done that play.
Yeah,
I
no,
did
we all
it.
saw it. We all saw
did
it.
it. I knew it didn't work
Because you did it.
because I did it.
Yeah.
Hence, I would have not done it this time.
Yeah. And this is just something, like I said, I gave Etai the weapon and not the strength to wield it. I just told him, I was like, Winter Orb is the key to the matchup. And
Which I think it is, by the way.
I had not imparted the additional wisdom of just like, you play a different game of Magic when there's a Winter Orb on the table. All of a sudden, cards in hand is no longer a limiting factor. And I have played dozens of test matches of Blue-White Dreadnought against dozens of Michael J. Flores hard control decks where he sits pretty on his 4 seals, 4 plows, 4 whatevers, and says, "There's no way I lose." And I put a Winter Orb in play, and all of a sudden I'm just like, "There's no way you win." And that's the key to the matchup. But
dozens of different decks, like dozens of games against a very bad deck.
Yeah. Well, one good deck, Rifter, of course. And Fran, and you know why I knew? We played this Rifter test match, and Mike's like, "I'm never gonna lose to Rifter." I'm like, "You don't understand."
I mean, I'm never going to lose to the Rifter side.
Yeah, you're never gonna lose from the Rifter side. I was like, "You don't understand." I played Francisco with the Rifter list versus Francisco and Blue-White Dreadnought, and he just Winter Orbed me. And I had made some mistakes, and I failed to kind of understand what was happening under Winter Orb, and Brian Selden certainly knows how to play with a Winter Orb on table.
It was legal when he was the world champion.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I think Winter Orb and the complexity that it added to the game sort of exacerbated the skill difference between Brian and Etai. The skill or familiarity difference between Brian and Etai, such that it's possible that with no Winter Orb in Etai's deck, he might have been better off. Yeah, it's possible.
I mean, you can call it inexperience, you can call it danger of cool plays, you can call it fatigue, but at the end of the day, it was a bad play, and the player who made better plays won. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and the player with thicker plot armor.
Yeah.
So I actually have to say, as much as I would have loved Etai to win, I like that the North American Premodern Championships are like won by Flint last year, won by Selden this year, like won by heroes of the format who play in monthlies and do well consistently, who are we're grinding in and out. Like, if I had won over Flint last year, that's a worse story for the rest of the community. It's great for one person, and it's bad for N-1 people.
That's correct. Ignoring the fact that Michael J. and his storied career, what if...
my many accomplishments.
Yeah, your many accomplishments, which I would begin to list, but you can... They're too long.
Just call up Tom Mattelski. He knows.
Yeah. I don't think you give yourself enough credit because it would be an incredible story. But I agree. I do think that, Brian Selden being rewarded, he was running hot. He was telling us every round, he was like, "I'm just running
He just running lucky, so lucky."
Yeah. But he also, I talked to him, I thought, from my background, I was like, Michael J. always references him as the world champion. So I actually thought that he was kind of what you would call a format tourist, right? Kind of just dabbling in pre-modern. I talked to him afterwards. I was like, no, he's super engaged. He knows.
He plays in the monthly every month. Yeah. He was in the spring playing top 8.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact,
he played at Lobstercon last
year. It shows
year.
how disengaged I am in that I hadn't really heard or seen him since before his spring fling finish and since before Michael J. started talking about him. Because I wasn't doing good enough in the monthlies to meet him in the elimination rounds. So it says more about me than it does about Brian. And Brian Selden and I grew up in exactly the same neighborhood, like 3 minutes walking distance from each other, 10 years apart. So that was super cool. Shout out to anybody who grew up in San Diego. Go Scripstrans High School Falcons.
You went to the same high school.
So apparently, my high school was founded in 93, and Selden said he graduated high school in something in the mid to late 90s or something. So he said his sister went to the school, but I don't know if he went. Yeah. But go San Diego Superchargers, rest in peace. So yeah, thicker plot armor. I mean, should we just talk about plot armor for a bit? The plot armor that Mattelski and Fran did not have. The
Jeez,
armor, the Mattelski story.
All right, so I'm going to take the reins for the.
Should we just finish up?
Let's do a wrap up.
Yeah,
we need to wrap up. Yeah, you need to wrap up. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the game ended a couple turns later after attacks from an angel, which I still think should be an artifact, but
not a good enough. Etai was holding a disenchant.
But yeah, the tournament ended. I mean, congratulated Brian. It's very well deserving champion.
You kind of didn't deserve it.
Thanks, Lanny.
Well, so
we wanted it, but that's what Mike is saying is Brian deserved it.
Yeah, interesting thing about Brian, he didn't lose a game until the top 8. Then he lost the first game in his top 8 match. He lost his first game to Flint. Andy lost his first game to Etai.
Jesus.
So he was down 1 in all 3 games. The fact that he lost his first game to Flint, though, is...
This is pretty unreal.
Flint was drunk and playing the fluctuator.
Dude, to be fair, I didn't see that much of his matches. He was playing out of his mind.
He's quite possibly, he's quite, the Prince of Premodern. We are merely,
We're not worthy.
Viscounts and noblemen in the court of Flint Espol.
I was declared the Lord of Premodern at the beginning of this podcast.
A prince
by you.
A prince is higher than a lord. A prince is literally the second, is just under king. So you know your place. You as a lord would still be an attendant at the court.
Well,
you're kind of a jester too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Fine.
But yeah,
and he was drunk.
And God, I love Flint.
Yeah,
so cool.
Yeah,
he's a cool guy.
We could only aspire to just be as effing chill and just
when Flint came to visit us, I was just like, I just need to impress Flint. So I called the coolest people I know to be like, what can I do?
And then Lanny picked up. So
what can I do to impress?
I was one of Mike's coolest Magic friends. I was at the Magic related meetup. We don't talk about non-Magic events on this podcast. Oh. We're not even going to allude to it.
Yeah, I mean, by then there were still a bunch of people there watching. People clapped for the champion. A bunch of people shook his hand, and people shook my hand too, and they said it was
complete strangers who are twice your age.
Yeah.
Twice? I'm anyway.
Beginning with, so was there? I mean, I guess it was rough because you had to fight from down in that third game.
Mm-hmm.
We listened to a landmark article, one of the best articles written, How to Win a PTQ, written by our very own Michael J. Flores, up on the car.
You listened to Roman and me, right?
Roman.
Imagine there was a podcast where people read great Magic articles.
Yeah,
imagine that.
The inaugural episode of the Ancestral Recall podcast, which for any aspiring PTQ winner or any tournament winner should listen to. The takeaway advice is that when you show up to the tournament, your mindset should be you've already won. Is that correct, Mike?
I've written a lot of articles.
Okay, fair.
I don't know.
Okay.
You listened to this more recently.
That's my takeaway.
Yeah.
So, and I actually feel, Etai, did you carry that mindset with you throughout the day?
I can't say that I did, to be honest.
But when you started, maybe at 4-0.
Actually, I can say this because I've been in the same tournament as Etai, probably more than either of the other two of you guys. I've teamed with Etai, and I'm not saying that Etai is one of those players who, if he's doing great, he's happy, and if he's not doing great, he's sad. I'm one of those players, right? Whatever, life sucks, versus I'm not better than everybody, you guys all suck, right? But I can tell you, I've been around Etai in a tournament that he's not doing so good, or he's just doing average, or he's barely alive, versus on Friday, I literally looked at him and I could see the plot armor. Right? He was invincible. And I don't know if he saw that consciously, but just he's just bopping around. He's EXO. He's oh, lost to Selden, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever, world champion.
Yeah, I believe Etai's tweet when he had locked top 8 was 7-1 lol Lamau. But I don't know, to me, and the reason why I bring this up, and listen, this is just a point of view. It is a very spiky point of view, but I'm just happy to get 4 wins, and literally that's what Flint said. I'm just happy to 4 wins is not good enough.
But do you think Flint really meant it? That's the thing. I think Flint was wearing his expert hat. Flint was no sleeves, rubber band. Every time Flint won a match, he gave his opponent a signed stabilizer, right?
And a beer.
Yeah.
Flint was not playing. Flint was not playing for himself. He was playing for Premodern. So like for the format as a whole.
But I think that like
He was playing for his kingdom.
no, but Flint was playing four-dimensional chess, right? Like he was living the bit, right? He clearly wanted to. I was working on that deck with Flint 2 months ago, right? Like I told you, I thought Flint's deck was super, super well built, right? Which I think it's gorgeously built.
Right.
So-
and I totally agree. And oh my God, there's so many topics here, and we will have
Flint.
our Prince Flint Espel on the NA podcast in a bit.
It'll
But
be named eventually.
it's important. It's important to give the background here. Flint played Fluctuator combo. So Fluctuator combo is the most linear deck in Premodern. It puts Fluctuator into play. It cycles its entire deck for free until there are a bunch of creatures in the graveyard. It casts Songs of the Damned to make a bunch of mana for the bunch of creatures.
Well, first it has to get a black mana. So there are like
I'm not going to explain the intricacies. Yeah, so they cast Songs of the Damned, makes black mana for all the creatures in the graveyard. Drain life the opponent for 26. It is deterministic. He said 26.
no, he said that's how many creatures he. Anyway, it's
Anyway,
less.
and Fluctuator combo has been known, but Flint made innovations to it, and it was a deck that nobody expected to show up. And it's a deck that cost very little, and Flint was playing it with no sleeves. And while the combo is deceptively simple, Flint was making extremely difficult decisions and knowing his lines and his matchups. Slamming a beer every match, buying a beer for his opponent and handing it to it, probably slamming another. He said I drank a beer a match, but it's likely he drank a beer during the match and then probably afterwards because they all lasted 15 minutes. And also people, look, if you when you're at Lobstercon, you must pay tribute to the royalty and buy Flint a beer. And I think some people were handing him some extras. So that by the time at the end of the night, he's like completely sloshed in the top four and still like just seeing the lines. Incredible stuff. So Stabilizer is a card that says 2 mana players can't cycle cards. He was handing out science stabilizers to his opponents in an effort to lighten the mood. Because, we were discussing this at the bar. The bit is great, but the bit also has victims. So hopefully Flint's attitude and cheeriness, made the losses sting a little bit less. I'm sure a loss to Flint would have stung very little given a beer and a signed stabilizer. And that was awesome. All right.
Well, I actually have a question before we finish this off, Etai.
Yeah.
What do you think of the format? What do you think of like the event? Like I'm really interested in hearing because you're basically kind of an outsider.
Yeah.
And these people basically bribed you into coming here, and you just.
What was the bribe, Etai? Did you get some Shieldreds? What happened?
No, it didn't take a lot. I was just told I would get handed a deck, and I'm like, all right. But yeah, I think. The tournament, first of all, was so sick. Each of my opponents was so kind, and I can say I'm disappointed in not closing in the finals, but I was more than disappointed. I was really happy for Brian and as the champion and as a clearly deserved win. And yeah, it was just good vibes all around. And yeah, the format. I mean, I think the 12-12 deck is really fun. I think all of my matches had some intricacy, had some moments, and then sometimes you just kill them, and that's great. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe they should ban land tax.
Wow.
Strong words.
Incredible.
That was a 90-degree divide by zero moment.
No words.
Okay, to be clear, when he was sitting at the feature match table, I was going to watch one of his matches, and Lanny looks up to me. He's like, I know you didn't look at this because you don't check the Discord, but I changed my mind. I think that land tags should be banned now. So I don't know why Sunday morning he's decided to go back to his old terrible opinion.
the needle's been moved for me for sure. Lots of numbers in the UID column, but lots of numbers in the UID column for a lot of different decks. So we'll talk about that on future episodes.
Lanny, I think you capped this one, and I think we should have Fran tell the story of our missing friend Tom Metelsky in a separate episode. That's my opinion.
Okay, that sounds good.
So sign us off.
That's the story of Etai Kurtzman's miracle run. I started, like, the whole thought of this, I was like, I knew Etai was a good player, and I knew Blue-White Dreadnought was a good deck. And before it happened, I was like, it would just be so funny if Etai just, like, top eights, like, just...
We thought he was going to top 8 with goblins, right?
Right. Like, he could top 8 with goblins. I think you should say the thing about the world making sense.
All right. So, Friday night, Etai didn't sleep at the house on Friday night, so he wasn't participant on this until Saturday night. But Friday night, Lanny made a bunch of speeches, and so he started a tradition that, like, everybody had to give speeches after they did well in the tournament. And, Etai slept at the house on Saturday, so he had to belatedly give his speeches. And David and I and Fran all made top 8 on Saturday, so we gave our speeches. And Lanny is referencing a thing that I said in my speech, right? So we were all, like, thanking each other and expressing gratitude for our community and our friendship. And what I said was, like, I've obviously gone on, like, a bunch of pre-modern podcasts, and people constantly just like, dude, you always talk about Lanny. You talk to Lanny on Twitter or whatever, and he's like, how good is Lanny really? And I always say the same thing. I was just like, I learned from Lanny. Like, I learned always from Lanny. I'm going to release a video soon of we had a playtest session that Pog and Lanny did, and I said, hey, just record it, because I'm just going to study the film later, so I'll be better, right? And I was flabbergasted at how well Lanny taught Pog, like, 4 different matchups, like, over the course of an hour. So good, right? So, and I was just like, Lanny is so dialed in. Like, I don't know how he got his table game, because he doesn't play. I don't know what serious Paper Magic Lanny plays. I don't know what Paper Magic Lanny plays other than with me, right? And we're just around. Oh, sorry. We're whatevering around, on, the FNM or whatever. And I was just like, the world that we live in is, like, so random. Like, things are terrible, or people are so undeservedly have things fall out of the sky in front of them. And for Lanny to have made this insane run and, like, do so well, the one thing he was hyper focused on, which was the North American Premodern Championships of 2023, it was like the world made sense to me. Like, Lanny was... Just write this down if you're, like, interested in, like, pre-modern, or, like, I don't know, you're out listening to this podcast or whatever. Lanny Huang is the most prepared pre-modern player in the world, bar none. And I'm confident in saying that because I cannot imagine anyone plays more paper pre-modern than I do. And most of my paper pre-modern is with Lanny. But then Lanny goes and plays online with Tom and Fran and David, outside of playing with me, in addition to playing, like, whatever these leagues you play in. Like, he's playing leagues. He's barely doing bad in the monthlies, but he's just playing it. You played in the Spring Fling too, right?
Yeah.
So he plays in all these things on top of playing with me, right? So I'm like, he must be the most prepared person. I think I play, like, a high amount of paper, so, like, I play, every week or whatever with one of my friends. Plus, I'm playing meetups and everything. And I have no clue what's going on compared to Lanny. Like I'll just, like, I'm like, oh, I beat this, but I didn't really understand it. And Lanny's like, oh, it's obvious. That's this deck, or, like, whatever. Or, like, earlier this cast, I'm like, Fran, explain this deck to me. I have no clue. I don't understand how this is, because my exposure is mostly, like, what people I end up playing against play, and apparently those people are doing research on decks. But I just, I'm just, like, kind of playing in reaction to that or coming up with my own ideas. But Lanny is apparently versed in everybody's ideas. The world is random. By contrast, you have Etai, who has very little preparation by comparison to Lanny, but also did well. And I think even a little bit, at least, more than a little bit by percentage, right, is the fact that Etai's training was not exhaustive. He doesn't know everything about the format like Lanny does, but he had a hell of a teacher, right? In a short period of time. Maybe he doesn't know everything. Like, maybe he doesn't know that the blue-red Tinker deck has a Devourer backdoor, right?
Or actually explain that to him.
Okay.
Or how
Okay, you actually taught him that the blue-red Tinker deck has... Lanny told me that
the meddling mage tinker
So Lanny
and
told me-
stifle altar.
Lanny told me that the blue-red Tinker deck has a Devourer backdoor after I played against the blue. I was like, oh, by the way, it is a Devourer backdoor. I'm like, thanks, Lanny. I never even seen this deck.
Blessing, so you're fine.
So anyway, but like he must have had a hell of a teacher, and so I think maybe some of that world making sense rubbed off on Etai, and I think the lesson there is, Etai is we were talking, during the now famous strip mall Dunkin' bathroom break that one of my favorite episodes of the Table for Two podcast was Alexander Haynes saying that there's no such thing as a specialist, right? Like, there's no such thing as like an archetype specialist or a format specialist. Those people just suck, right? Like, so that just means like, oh, you're a burn specialist? Does that mean you're bad at everything else? And when I listened to that, I was like, oh, shoot.
Because Michael J. Flores is a burn specialist.
He's right? Like, so you're just bad at everything else. So Etai is actually just a good Magic player, and he was handed the best deck, or approximately the best deck. And that's a pretty strong overlap when you have Lanny as your teacher. So maybe it's a little less random than I said while I was razzing Etai during my speech. Is that what you wanted me to say, Lanny?
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less. I think. We hedged. Like, I was ready for this event. Everyone was gonna play land still. Parfay's not good against land still.
But you still beat the land still you played, right?
No, I played against a blue-white control deck.
Okay.
We'll talk about my run. And yeah, giving Etai the dreadnought deck was a hedge. I put a bunch of work into Parfait, so I wanted to prove, I wasn't going to pivot. I wasn't going to panic and pivot. I was going to stick by my guns.
You wanted to prove that everyone saying to ban Lancel was right? That's what you wanted to prove? Or Lantax, I mean?
Well, I don't know. But, yeah, I was like, well, Etai is going to be, Etai was just me playing a second hand at the table. And
that's such an amazing way of thinking about the dealer.
Yep.
The dealer is dealing two decks.
We both hit. Yeah. I split tens. And Etai got an ace and I got a 10. And it was, I don't know how, like, it was the most emotional Magic related thing that's ever happened to me. And like, I don't like the analogies, like Etai's not like a son, we actually really just play Magic. There's a big age difference. Etai like lives in Boston. He's studying in Boston. Don't see him a lot. But Etai was so open about the process. I'm going to be honest, a lot of people on our team don't listen to me, despite being the most knowledgeable. And it's okay.
I only listen to you when you're right. And let's put that
to you.
Well, you don't listen and then do what I tell you to, but you do. Yeah, you listen. And Etai was just extremely open. I think, he earned it. He earned it because he was taking what I was telling him. He was adding in his own insights. He was learning as he went. It was just like completely unreal. And it was just emotional because I think it's just being in the presence of someone accomplishing something like it's monumental like this is just it's indescribable, and the fact that it was the highest sort of accomplishment, but it just produced so much like communal joy. Like it's just our collective hearts just exploded and just were like overfull, and just like Magic is awesome. Like that just ruled. So Thank you for that, Etai.
Is that the cap to our first episode?
Oh, Etai should probably give us
Right.
the very last word.
Okay, Etai, give the cap.
Thank you so much, Lanny. I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
And that's the first episode. We did it. And we're just gonna pause, take a sip of drink. We have an hour 39 left. The traffic's super bad, so let's just
Buckle up. Call it that.
and yeah.
Game over.